Hi everyone. We're back for part two of my Rolmo interview with Amba, Rinchen, Sarah Caldwell. In case you've missed part one, Amba received her PhD from the University of California in Berkeley, and she has a 16-year career in the academic world and also as a personal practitioner in the Hindu and Buddhist tantric systems. I'm here with Amba today, following up with the question that we left at the end of part one. So let me welcome back, Amba. How are you today?
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Great. I am very excited and interested for this part of the interview. I'd like to start with what we were just ready to discuss, which is the question I'd like to know, in your opinion, about the gap. Is there a gap between the principles of Tantra, especially now we're talking about the enlightened feminine or the divine goddess? So what about the gap between the principles as they are pronounced in the Tantras and the realities of daily life? I think this is an important topic. I'm remembering at the beginning of our interview, you said that you left academia because you wanted to have the direct experience of the feminine principle. So then, since then, you discovered the feminine principles through the Tantra, so I'm assuming that you're still left with seeking the direct experience. So how has that been for you?
Right. Well, I'll say something about the culture I was studying first, more generally about Hinduism in India, and then about myself. I'll try to be brief. Although it's impossible to generalize about a whole culture, the benefit of my studying it from an anthropological lens was that I did study the culture as lived in situ. And one of the main things I was trying to study in my work was the relationship between the theology of the culture, the rituals, and the actual gender practices. I focused a lot on gender. And for those who didn't hear the first part, my studies were on a form of worship in which men dress as the goddess Kali in a very elaborate ritual and become possessed by her spirit. But women were prohibited from ever donning the costume or even entering the space where the Kali was being brought forward. So they were totally marginalized. And this in a society in India and South India where women were said to have had a very high standing. So it was quite a surprise for me. So my work was really focusing on what gender meant for them, what goddess meant for them, and so on. So without recapping all that, I'll just say that more generally, my experience in South Asia up until very recently, and I think the culture is changing quickly, but the traditional Hindu culture is such, and many cultures in the world have been such, that women's only valid role, the wife and mother. So as we looked at the slides in the first interview, we saw that goddesses, and there are many, who represent the happy married state are the most revered and most positive role models, and the goddesses we worship in daily life, and the only goddesses that are really role models for actual women. So Lakshmi, Saraswati, goddesses who behave well, who are happily married, bring forth prosperity. That's the job of women, expressly stated in the Hindu culture. The Durga and Kali models are very much put aside and not for women to emulate. And I was really struck in South India how if a woman behaved badly, a girl was sulking or yelling or disobeying, she would be insulted or put down by being called a real Kali. So Kali was a negative epithet. Don't be like that. It means basically, in my understanding, a disruption of the social order. So the fascinating thing is that these goddess figures provide us with such a wide variety of views. Yes. One are the goddesses who represent social order, and one are the ones who disrupt it. In my own life, this
so
has
if
also...
I can just say, so there is a kind of partial seamlessness or integration between theory and practice. Having this preference for those archetypes that support the cultural hierarchy, which culture, which really has nothing to do with the purity of the tantras. So at least there's a partial real embodiment
Yes.
of certain. Yes, I just want to make sure I really understand that. And then there's a rejection
Yes.
of the others. That's really really quite fascinating. So yes, please continue.
Well, that's a very interesting observation because, of course, in our culture, we have felt the lack of any divine female role models. So,
Yes.
yes, here's a culture where there are many types of divine female role models, but they're kind of laid out, yes, as externalizations of feminine qualities, which the culture at large judges and says these are good and these are not so good. And we also pointed out in the first lecture that women, historically, who wanted to pursue a full-time pursuit of enlightenment as spiritual people, basically had to reject all their social roles as wives and mothers. There wasn't a place within being a wife and mother for that. And that's obviously easy to understand. Anyone who's lived in that life knows that a wife and mother, at least in traditional culture, is a person who dedicates all her time to serving other people. That's what the job is. And especially in a non-automated culture, that's a full-time, more than full-time job. So there just wasn't room for her to pursue her own enlightenment except through the path of being a good wife and mother. So women who did want to pursue that had to reject that entirely and become celibates in one way or another. And we saw that even today, women gurus in India do still pursue it in that way. So for myself, being a Western woman, that wasn't, I tried that actually. I tried being a celibate and being a nun. I was going to do all that route because that was the most intense route to the divine that I saw, but it didn't turn out that way for me. So I have been married. I am a mother and had jobs and regular life. So yes, it's been a constant struggle, as all of us understand, between these two things. But always my desire to seek enlightenment pushed me forward and made me do what I had to do that. So I'm interested, and I think we're going to be talking together today to compare our own experiences in what resources are there within these relative tantric traditions that we both are in that are providing a third alternative, not just being wife and mother, not just being a nun, but a third alternative. And that, for my side, is the tantric yogini. And the Dakini seems to be the image on your side, which I hope we can compare and talk about.
Yes.
So I'm looking at that as what does it mean to be an adept, have intellectual understanding of the philosophy, have access to the texts, have access to all of the initiations and empowerments, and actual personal experience of the divinity, and remain in your normal role as a normal, fully functioning woman. That's where I think Western women are very interested to go.
Absolutely, and I think it's interesting. I'm most familiar with the Tibetan Buddhist culture, and it's a little bit different than what you described in the Hindu culture. Because in the Tibetan culture, there are some very famous examples of women who were married, or we call that usually referred to as householders, and they became enlightened masters. For example, Machi Glabdrun in the 14th century is perhaps the most famous one. So there is a place in the culture of Tibet for women to seek their own enlightenment while being married and being mothers. But obviously, but that's a small stream. Probably the vast majority felt exactly the lack of opportunity that you described for the Hindu culture. The other thing is that the way of pursuing or seeking enlightenment can also be different for women in the Tibetan culture. It's kind of understood, there's a kind of a judgment that it's done in secret and it's not obvious. They don't publish books, they don't teach, they don't become gurus. But yet, it is stated that they are realized and that a lot of the great male masters do attribute a lot of their realization to their mothers. So we have some slightly different maybe cultural norms there. But as far as being in the West, then in the West, I think both men and women are very interested in the direct experience of the wisdom, compassion, or the elements of the divine feminine, the enlightened feminine. And everyone is pursuing that. In the West, it seems to be through meditation. And the problem becomes then the integration, how to carry it with you in daily life. And
Right.
so it becomes very isolated in terms to spend all this time in meditation and in ritual to become the feminine deity, to install that as your persona. But then people are at a complete loss as to how to carry that into daily
Mm.
life.
Mm. Yes. Well, that's very interesting. And I think that when we spoke about this earlier, you were intrigued a little bit by the practices that I referred to as Sri
Yes.
Vidya, which were ritual practices that include meditation and contemplation and ritual, but also other practices that we can do in our daily life that give a very direct and concrete way of actualizing that view. So maybe
So
that's
give
a
us an
good
example of
segue.
one of those practices. Yes, I am very attracted to that. Please tell us an example.
Well, it's also a good segue into
Mm-hmm.
the images that we were going to be talking about, and it might be worthwhile to briefly show people the image that we have in our first slide for
Sure.
this portion, which is of Sri Lalita Devi and Yeshit Sogyal, and in a minute we'll talk about the comparison. But the image of Lalita Devi is the goddess, also known as Tripura Sundari, the beauty of the three worlds, or Raja Rajeshwari, the queen of queens, the empress of the universe, many different names. And her name Lalita means the playful one. Goddess is Devi. Shri is just an honorific. Sri Lalita Devi. Shri also can refer to the quality of auspiciousness, beauty, beneficence, everything good that is manifesting in phenomena. So she is shown in that slide in her traditional iconography in the Hindu culture, and the worship culture around her is called Sri Vidya. Vidya means wisdom, supreme wisdom. So the Sri Vidya path is a whole style of practice of sadhana in which one learns to worship her as oneself, both internally and externally, and in all phenomena. And it's a kind of a way into the ultimate final view of enlightenment, which is hard to grasp, right? And I think that's true in every tantric tradition, that we need to hang on to something externalized. And it's fascinating to me that we have these two feminine ways of looking at this. So in the Sri Vidya, in this image, you see her there, and I'll just mention briefly about her iconography in her hands.
I just want to, if I may, this is so exciting. I'm just like sitting on the edge of my seat here. This is the first time that I've been able to learn in this way, and this sort of comparative Dakiniology that you're creating. Thank you so much for sharing it with me on Rolmo. I think everyone is going to just be very inspired by this, and we can. So I just wanted to say thank you before you go forward. Thanks so much. And also, you are using the images of the Dakini heart essence, which is the lineage that I represent and teach and experience. So thank you for using images that are really relevant to the Dakini heart essence.
Well, it goes without saying that this is only happening because of you, and because you appeared in my life this year and introduced me to the Dakinis and the Dakini heart essence, which I would never have had access to in a way that was so powerful. So I
You're
thank
welcome.
you. And it's clearly coming from them, not from us.
Right. So let's
doing our
channel.
best
Let's channel.
channel. Right. So, yeah, I was so struck because I have spent about 10 years in the Sri Vidya practice and other Hindu goddess practices, entering into Tibetan Buddhism fortuitously, blindly, into the Dakini heart essence of all things, was my first encounter with this. And I immediately recognized the same thing. I only can say, even though the teachings are different, the view, the mantras, the language, everything is different, it's the same. And I recognized, oh, this is same. So today is our effort to try and bring that out a little bit and churn that a little and see what we can make out of these comparisons. So to bring out a little more about Sri Lalita Devi, the Sri Vidya practice is one in which basically we recognize that fundamental reality or consciousness, which is referred to in this tradition as Lord Shiva, as if it's a god. But really, it's not a human-like god at all. It's, I think, similar to your concept of emptiness. So it's this ground of everything which is luminous and which expresses itself through phenomena. I think that there's a similarity.
Absolutely. We would call it Samantabhadra in Samantabhadri. We have a male and female Buddha figure, deity figure that represents the space of reality in which everything evolves. And then just on the feminine side, we would have Prajnaparamita.
Wow. So we call this in the Hindu tradition Shiva and Shakti. And they're considered not to be different from one another. They're not two people. They are aspects of one thing that we can see like. So the Shiva side is a transcendent witness of everything, and the Shakti side is everything that manifests. That's the way
So
it's
this
understood.
is a little opposite from Buddhist Tantra, in that the feminine is the unmanifest and the masculine is the manifest.
Amazing. So with both of these, you get the whole picture. So in this image, then, Devi is the manifestation, but not just a phenomena. It's all of consciousness. It's all, anything that is perceptible, which is part of Shiva, is manifesting through her. She is his power and energy, his mind. But we can see her, and we can't see him. So that's the idea. So she is seated on a throne in a very queen-like manner. And in some images, Shiva is actually shown as a corpse underneath her, that she's sitting on him. And secretly, the teaching is that they're in union, in sexual union, like the Yagyung of your Tibetan tradition. In this image, we only see the female, but I wanted to focus on her hands because there's an interesting point there. She has 4 hands, and in the rear 2 hands, on the upper left, she has a noose called pasha, which represents desire and that attachment that we have. So basically, her symbols are about our mind and our emotions, and both the negatives that we have and her ability to transform those. So we are attached, but she attaches us to her because she's beautiful and she's attractive, and we get attracted to everything about her, and so she transforms our attachment to the divine. On the other hand is the ankusham, which is the traditional goad for an elephant, and that is supposed to represent anger. So the prod that we use to move a stubborn elephant is like the control of anger. In her front hands, she has on the bottom right the 5 flower arrows, which represent the tanmatras, or the senses, the 5 senses. And in the left, a sugarcane bow, which is said to be dripping with a string of honeybees. Very beautiful imagery. So what does this mean? This means that our mind is attracted through the senses to the outer world and becomes totally involved and attracted there, and then shoots those senses through the sugarcane mind, which wants the sweetness, the essence of those sensory experiences, and the bees are flitting around trying to drink out the nectar of the sensory experiences. So instead of regarding this as a negative, which in some yogic traditions like Vedanta, it's said that all of our external phenomena are Maya, they're illusion, we have to reject them, we have to control, we have to go inside and not feel. This is a tantric approach. So that means Devi is saying everything is me. All the senses are my play for my beloved who is watching, Lord Shiva. It's a beautiful erotic metaphor that every single thing in our mind and body is offering to the Supreme. So that's the basis of the general view. She's shown here with 2 goddesses underneath, Saraswati and Lakshmi. In more tantric images, she'll be shown with 2 deities, Varahi, whom you've heard of, I think, and we're going to look at in a minute, and Matangi. Matangi is shown where Saraswati is shown, and she is a tantric form of Saraswati with green skin. She's from a low caste, a fisherman caste, a tribal, forest-dwelling person. She has a parrot. She's in control of magical mantras and formulas. And Varahi is the one that goes into the Ajna chakra, or the center here, and opens the 3rd eye and takes us up to the experience of realization. So there's some interesting feminine deities there. Then under her feet, you can see she's touching a yantra, which in the Tibetan system, I think is paralleled by a mandala, which is a sacred diagram that is where she lives. So actually, when we do the worship or puja, we go inside of this diagram one level at a time, and it represents Mount Meru, which I think you also have in your system, and an island where she dwells, and magical things and jewels, but it also represents the human body. So we learn to go through the different levels of the body, the different levels of consciousness, the senses, and ultimately to return. So in short, the system represents all of creation, how it's manifested, and a path to go back through the body. And the beauty of the system is that it has a lot of ways you can actually actualize her in yourself, whether you're a man or a woman. But for women, it's very powerful. I think for men too, but I'm a woman, so I can only say for me, this was very healing and very powerful to map the goddess, and you map her head and her eyes and her mouth and her breast and her whole body onto your body as you do the worship. By sacralizing yourself and identifying yourself not only with this feminine divine form, but that also represents the entire cosmos, the entire universe. So it's very empowering, and it also teaches you, once you've sacralized that, to detach from that and to raise that to its inner essence, which is not stuck in this fleshly attached place. So there are many, many rituals, and I do teach about those, and I do this practice. And they do bring it into our daily life. We can walk around saying her mantra. We can remember our identity with her at all times. And when two people, whatever their gender, sit with each other and do this practice together, it transforms their attached, contracted way of interacting and raises them to a very high form of worship of other people. So those are some of the contributions.
I'm looking at listening to some of the things that stood out for me in comparison with the Yeshe Tsogyal. Of course, she is known as the outer Dakini, so she is actually not just a deity, but all phenomena also. And she's a pacifying. Her activity is pacifying. And her implements are the curved blade in her right hand, and the skull cup filled with ambrosia in the left, the idea being that with the curved blade, something like maybe what you were saying, that instrument for the taming the wild elephants, with that curved blade, we kind of sever and or cut through or annihilate our dualistic perceptions, and then that creates the nectar or the ambrosia or the honey that is in the skull cup. So again, they're both having the same function of an alchemical function of transmuting the negative back into its original purity. And so that's how it's, so I felt that this was a similarity. And of course, too, in the Buddhist tantric practices, we do have, reciting mantra and carrying the identity through daily life. But we don't, that's still kind of considered a meditative practice. There is nothing really, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. Just like, I guess maybe the problem in my mind is that everything is a meditative practice ultimately. So why make a distinction between meditative and non-meditative? But I'm just imagining that if I were to live in certain part of India as a practitioner, identifying with Sri Lalita, that there would be more cultural opportunities to embody, express, and communicate that paradigm than there are in the West with Yeshe Tsogyal. So even though the Yeshe Tsogyal, she's not only a deity, but she actually lived as a human being in 8th and 9th century Tibet, and she left a very human life story. So she can serve as an archetype for how to live your life if you are completely just dedicated to seeking enlightenment. She's not an archetype to follow, like if you want to be a good mother or something like that. What she teaches is the path to enlightenment above all. But I feel maybe the Hindu goddesses are also teaching about how to just live this life in a more in an ordinary way that has dignity and purity. Whereas in the Buddhist side of it, it's more this ordinary life. It is inherently pure, but our perception of it is impure. So therefore, the only thing to do is to seek enlightenment, and it's kind of a waste of time to try and imagine or pretend that we're having a pure perception when we're not enlightened. I don't know.
Well, that's exactly where the Hindu Tantra can come back in and provide some grounding. Because what you're referring to in the Shaiva Tantras is called the Anuttara, and I know you have that same word, the supreme path. And it elaborates 3 different means to enlightenment. Mm-hmm. The highest is this direct perception. The second highest is using the mind, and I think this is where we have a common ground. Understanding, visualization, meditation, trying to visually or mentally perceive it through practices inside is a high path. But there's a lower path, which is actually considered to be where 99% of the people are at. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's sort of missing in what you're describing. I'm not sure, but it's very elaborated.
We do have those levels of Tantra, many different classes of Tantra, outer Tantras and inner Tantras. And within, but what's current in the West today is only the highest Tantras. And the inner really Tantras, like we've a lot. There's no embodiment in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of the lower Tantras, very little, Kriya and so on and so forth. So we do have it, but that's been lost. And so people don't have access to those ways of embodying in a more ordinary way.
Well, this is where the Sri Vidya can be very easily transplanted. I practice this at home. I have a puja room here in my house. I do this at home. I can do it in a couple of hours, short or long. I can do it up to 5 hours or in an hour and a half. It's a fairly elaborate puja, but I can do it at home. And it's very powerful, and it embodies all of these levels. So what this provides is, yes, as you pointed out, a way that an ordinary, start where you are, as Pema Chodron says. I can be me right now, and I can start doing this, and I can map her onto myself, and I can start worshiping. I just spoke with a woman friend of mine today from the Hindu temple that I was associated with, and she was looking for a murti, or a statue of a deity. And we were discussing, how valuable is it to have this statue? And I was encouraging her to go more inward and to generate that energy from within, and not to get fixated on not having the statue. And she said, well, I'm just an ordinary person. I haven't done that sadhana yet. I can't do that. I need to see the outer one. And it was such a beautiful statement, because it's not really true. She's not an ordinary person, but she was humbly stating her desire to relate to an outer figure. And that's how we relate in life, right? We eat, we drink, we meet people, we smile at them. So having deity images and statues and being able to serve them and feed them, this gives us a way in. And the thing is that if we remain feeling that they are there and we're here, we stay at a very contracted level, and we're dependent on that. So this Tantra provides a bridge where we have that enjoyment of the duality, but as if it's a play. We know that actually we're them. So it gives very direct ways to experience them as us. If we experience we are them, that's nice, but there's a way to map it onto your own body, so then when you leave the puja, that goes with you. And you have a different sense of yourself as you walk through the day, or as you interact with people. That changes your way. So this anupaya, this anava-upaya, they call this individual means, is very detailed rituals that are not meaningless. They have great power to transform our consciousness, and they work with our emotions and feelings as they are, instead of just an intellectual level.
Great. The next slide is one of my very famous Singamukha, the lion-faced Dakini, and you're comparing her into the Hindu tradition. So,
before you move to that, I'd like to just point out that our Lalita Devi, like Yeshet Tsogyal, you see Yeshet Tsogyal has below her these 3 fierce forms, including Singamukha, Sroma, and Kurukula, which I'm sure you can explain well. So in our picture of Lalita Devi, it is said that the image you see there, which is very benevolent and beautiful, as you said, pacifying, contains within it more powerful energies, that if we were to see them directly, we would run away. So they're fearful to us because they're too direct. And some people say that the back face of Lalita is Kali, or like Truma, and we're going to see that in a minute. That in fact she is really that, but that if we saw that, we won't get attracted, we'll run away.
So well, we have the same thing. Yeshe Tsogyal is the outer form, and inner form is Kurukule, and then we have secret form and innermost secret. So they're all emanations of the principle of the enlightened feminine, or the source of everything. But just like you said, there's the outer form, and then from there, you know, more and more direct is a very good way to put it, because Truma, which is the innermost form, that is the direct experience of the nature of mind, of the nature of reality. So yes, same idea, Amba.
So we have to build up our strength, and it's okay if we start with the easy one. It's okay if we start with the pleasant one. Somebody made a great point once that if you go to Sri Lalita Devi and you start the sadhana, but you get distracted, you know, you just kind of take a detour and you fall in love with somebody, or you go into some trip or other, you know, she'll just sit there patiently and wait for you. Even 10 years or another lifetime, you come back to her, she'll be smiling and happy. But if you do this with Kali, you know, you're going to pay. So better to start with the nice mom. You know, that's the way they look at it.
That's
so
really humorous.
As we move on to the next slide, you can see this similarity between two other deities that are part of the mandala that you showed us. One on the left is Pratyangira Devi, who is very popular in South India. She's a rather ancient tantric deity that's somewhat been lost in the north of India, although she's strong in Nepal forms. And I was actually in the temple where I was working. We had this image that you see here, which is a rather large image that was made in South India with some other deities to go with. And I was the priest for this, and I was doing all her mantras and all her ritual. She's a very strong and very powerful deity that has the ability to overcome obstacles, negative forces, and so on. And I'm come to believe that Simhamukha has a similar function. It's very clear if we look at their iconography with the flame hair. This is one of the elements in tantric iconography, the way the hair is. The more bound the hair, like the top knot in the earlier one, the more calm.
More peaceful.
But as the hair comes out, it gets crazy.
They have that in common. Yeah, they even say like the hair pounds the the three planes of conditioned existence. So you can shake your head and all beings can be liberated.
I kept mine bound today, but there she is, and she's got flame hair, which I see a similar element in Simhamukha, and of course her face is a lion.
Mm-hmm.
And also she has this bull in her left hand, in this case, that is full of blood, and she has these fierce implements. So there's a similarity there. And the first webinar that I took with you, Lama Yeshe, I think you remember, was Simhamukha. I came into your cycle just at that point, and immediately recognized it. It was so powerful and overwhelming, you know, to do her sadhana with you, and immediately felt this liberation and this very beautiful feeling. Mm-hmm. So I think these two are closely connected, and it would be so interesting to know more historically about that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the lion is important. I know that the Buddhist Tantra did borrow the imagery of the lion from the Hindu Tantras. And then Singamukha is like Yeshe Tsogyal in that she carries the curved blade and the skull cup. But in this case, and so that's a similar, so already there's not like a total, not everything is different from Yeshe Tsogyal. And of course the long trident represents the masculine consort, or she represents space and the trident represents phenomena. So
we also see the trident in Pratyangira's right hand.
Of course, the
which represents Bhairava, or the fierce masculine energy. So this incorporation of masculine power manifesting through the feminine, ferocious power What does the lion symbol mean in this system?
Well, in Tibetan culture, of course, it's become has a different meaning. On one level, it's just the most powerful animal, and so therefore the roar of the lion disperses the heaviness of ignorance. The lion-faced Dakini has a lot of historical significance. She first appeared in the iconography at the time of this great debate in India between the Buddhists and the non-Buddhist. And so she appeared too, and actually won the debate for the Buddhist side, according to the Buddhist legend. And so that's that she's actually the mind aspect of Guru Rinpoche or Guru Padmasambhava.
It's powerful because
so it's about power. It's about power.
Power, and the lion symbol, especially in the Hindu side, represents this carnivory or this almost violent conquest. That it's not fearless and that it absorbs the eating metaphors. That she will eat ignorance.
Exactly.
She'll eat that's what's impure and take it in. She's not afraid of it.
Yes, that's exactly the same. Yeah.
So as we go on, I just thought it was interesting to point out Kurukula, who's an important part of your Dakini heart essence system. And you mentioned, in my understanding, in your teaching, that she represents attraction, magnetizing energy, the power, we would say, of desire in some ways, perhaps. That's also seen in the Srividya, and she's also a guardian. So on the left is a small image, it was the best one I could find, of a statue of Kurukula in the Srividya temple in Rochester, New York, where I took my initiations. And she has a bow, and she has, I think, a skull garland. And it's interesting that around her top of her head, she has a chaplet, which is very similar to that of the Tibetan, which maintains a very ancient tantric image of 5 skulls at the top, very old Shaiva imagery. So I just thought it was very interesting that this protector, who's also a magnetizer, is in both of these as a remnant.
So Kurukule has several forms. The most common form is 4 arms, and one pair of arms is holding the bow and arrow, just like your statue. The Kurukule in the Dakini heart essence is a unique one in that she doesn't have the bow and arrow, but she does have the a stick kind of made of flowers and a noose. So the Kurukule is, even though she, in some traditions or lineage she's kind of semi-wrathful, in the Dujin Dakini heart essence, she doesn't have that wrathful aspect of it. It's almost like a mother archetype, using that noose to bring in and to guide all beings to enlightenment. So, and of course, with the bow and arrow too. The arrow are made of flowers or of lotuses, which is, of course, supreme awareness itself, pure consciousness.
But I'm so struck by what you said, that the flowers and the noose, this is all like Lalita Devi's power of attraction. So again, there's sweetness, that loving, erotic, attractive type of energy.
And absolutely, her body is red, which is, of course, we know the red light district. It's that same thing, that color of desire, and transmuting the desire. So definitely. With the Cupid thing, there's I've read quite a few things, people linking the bow and arrow to the goddess of love, or Cupid.
Yeah, and I think from the little I've read about that, Padma Dakini, isn't that what it's called? That red desire energy that when
Lotus
transmuted to wisdom is discernment.
Yes.
So I'm so struck by this really interesting idea in the Tibetan system that when it's manifesting in a negative way or in a diluted way, it has one effect, but that exact same thing can, alchemically turn into what we need for enlightenment. And this is the key idea in Srividya as well. Yeah. So I think this is one of the fascinating ideas of the feminine energy, which does engage with the world through the body in a very real way, just by the nature of our bodies. and that's not a bad thing, that we can go through those and transform those. We're not afraid to touch and engage with the world. And this is, in my view, the beauty of the goddess principle, is that she is not just a mother in an abstract way, but, mother holding, feeding, touching, and engaging and giving. And this is important.
Thank you. Yeah.
The last slide is just Kali and Thruma. I think it's very clear to see.
This is so wonderful. This is like total success.
This one is pretty clear, and Kali is the main deity that I have studied, and we don't need to say a lot about that. I'd rather hear what you have to say about Thruma, but it's the fierce approach, and as I said, she's considered the kind of secret side of Lalita, and our teacher at the Rochester Temple put it in such a beautiful, short way. I'd like to share it. He said that Lalita Devi, if you approach her for enlightenment, she'll coo at you, she'll entice you, she'll give you sweets, she'll make it so lovely for you. And it might take a long time because you are just in a trance. But if Kali is on one side of the door and you're on the other side, she'll just grab you by the hair and pull you through the keyhole. Yes. And your whole skin probably come off.
Yes.
But she won't wait. She just do it like that. So they always warn you, don't approach her unless you are ready for that kind of an engagement.
The Truma practice is not a widespread practice. Really came forth through Dujum Lingpa in the 20th century. And so it's not unlike Kurkule or Singamuka, which are more widespread. The Truma, historically speaking, is a revealed treasure, timeliness for this historical period of time, emergency measure. There's no time for the Lalita approach anymore, just generally speaking. So she is the Dakini in a way of the Kali Yuga, of these difficult times, which are very difficult and challenging, but the advantage is that if you break through, you have to break through. So it's very focused. And so then you do break through.
Right.
So that's the good news of the Kali Yuga, is that there are also these corresponding skillful means to put all of these difficulties into positive channel. And the Truma practice spread like wildfire in eastern Tibet, and it seems it has been very well accepted in the West also. And we have many sanghas doing Truma practice. So it's speaking or responding to people's needs, even though it is an extreme. But this is an extreme time,
Yes. Then we have one last slide on Varahi, and I can see very clear iconographic similarities. Varahi is a very secret deity in the Hindu Tantra tradition. Some people are terrified of her practice because some people use it to cause harm. She has the kind of power to cure even terminal illness, and she's very strong. So her vidya, her knowledge, is very little known by many people. Personally, I didn't feel anything like that with her. We had this exact murti, this image in the temple, and I have a great feeling of love for her, a great feeling of joy when I see her. I don't feel anything negative at all. And she takes us to this higher level. She dwells here. She's also associated in some ways with a deity called Chinnamasta in the Hindu Tantra, who is shown with her head cut off and blood coming out, all kind of interesting things. But she's a deity who is up here, and her mantra, I came to find out, although I have not taken empowerments in this in Buddhism, but I've read the mantra. It's this pretty much the same mantra as the Vajra Yogini Varahi image. And I've done a lot of reading of basically whatever's available on my side of the fence on this early period. And I'm starting to read about the Buddhist scholarship as well on this same period. We're talking about a period, say, from the 4th century CE to the 11th or 12th century, where this tantras were being published, and there was real interaction between different groups, not only what we call Buddhist and Hindu, but many different cults and sects, including things that were not part of either of those two, they're called the charnel ground people, the siddhas. They were people that were doing these very outside of the norm practices. They were exchanging philosophical views. They were borrowing symbolism. They were borrowing practices. And then eventually, as you pointed out, there's this camping out. There's this need to establish my camp, or my thing is better than your thing. So my, deity ate your deity, or my text won over your text. And frankly, this is exactly what it's like in academia. So there are scholarship now of these tantric sides, and I won't name the scholars, but you know who you are. And, one great scholar on one side is saying, no, the Buddhists borrowed everything from the Shaivas. And then the Buddhist scholar is saying, no, they borrowed everything from us. Who cares, frankly? I mean, I guess from a scholarly academic point of view, it's necessary to say, but we'll never be able to say. So one thing that I'm really interested in is the idea of collaborative study and practice. And I think our collaboration is an effort to embody that in a stumbling way. You made a beautiful comment to me when we first started to discuss this. You said, did you catch the part in Yeshe Tsogyal's autobiography where she meets Mandarava? And I rushed to the text and looked up that 2 pages. And sure enough, there's these 2 consorts of Padmasambhava. Already an interesting concept. They could have been jealous of each other. One from India, one from Tibet, right? One did one thing, they could have been fighting like cats, but instead they meet and they exchanged knowledge. I was so struck. They didn't just hug and kiss each other and say we're both Devis. They had an intellectual discussion. And one said, could I learn about your rituals and I'll share mine? And they did that. And I was so impressed by that and by your bringing that comment up. And I think it's inspired me in recent weeks to come up with the concept of the Yogini Mela, which is drawing on an image of temples that we see.
Mela means gathering or what? I'm not sure.
Does.
Yeah, because I know there's this famous Mela that happens every 12 years.
Kumbh Mela, right.
So, like that. I love this. Yogini Mela. This is beautiful. So Tell us more.
Trying to create that, and it's just a seed idea at the moment, but I'm drawing from an image, and perhaps I'll provide the image to you, of the Yogini temples, which are these mysterious temples in India. Nobody knows anything about them much. There's some work on them, but they're basically very different from all other temples in India in that they're circular, they're open to the air, and they are full of niches in which are female divinities, each one the same size but different. They have animal heads, they have different kinds of features, they're very full-figured, and they clearly are tantric goddesses. They're wisdom deities. They're said to come from the sky, so there's this concept of sky flying and whatever that means. There were books and research, but we don't really know what was going on. But what I love is the concept of this circle that has a focal point in the center. That was the Bhairava, was the male consort, or the yogin, in that time, in this ancient time. And what I love about it is the idea of each one having an entry point to something else. So each yogini is a master of something, or knows something, is a doorway to something. They come together in a group that's equal to share and collaborate, but they don't exclude the male also. And it doesn't seem to me there's any reason why a man couldn't be in the yogini niche and a woman couldn't be in the center. In our today's world, these body things aren't as important. But the concept of sharing power, and the other interesting part about these yogini texts is that they clearly state that the divine form of yogini or dakini comes into a lama, which is you, a teacher, human woman teacher, and we have actual images from this period of women teachers and adepts with male students at their feet, very rare, but they exist, and into human women. And in fact, the Yogini cult says every woman could be a Dakini you don't know, or a Yogini. You better learn how to approach her with respect. So it's a beautiful way of understanding, and I hope that going forward we can encourage other people watching this to share without this territorial thing, without saying, mine is right, yours is wrong, mine is better, yours is worse. This is a poor idea, and it's something that we can take the idea of the Yoginis and Dakinis sharing knowledge and expanding and helping each other.
I think everybody wants it. When everybody is thirsting for this, everybody knows that it's the right thing to do. It's where we're at now. It's what needs to happen. It's what wants to happen. And I think we're just at the beginning of this emergence of this embodiment of the feminine principle in lived through experiences, and the types of things that are kind of going, the structures that need to be built to support that, the structures that need to be deconstructed to support that. And generally it's a thrust of like a widening of the mind beyond, I think it's like a cleansing in a way, Things have become so narrow and constricted through the models of hierarchy and competition and perfection and excellence. And, I feel so distanced from myself when I even just think of those terms. But I have to live and function as a teacher in those structures, So I liked Yeshe Tsogyal's palace, her residence, and where she lives is semicircular. And I thought, so maybe the circle is like representative of these kinds of principles that we're talking, and then there's a straight line, because it's like a three-quarter moon shape. So interesting to just ponder. And there's a reason why her palace is not square. Like most other deities, So I think there's a message there. There's a message of wisdom. That's a clue as to how to build our culture and our structures, or at least our dharma structures. And so everybody wants to be a living yogi or yogini, yeah. And I think what we share together is we want people to get that, we want to get it for ourselves. But I don't know, for myself, I feel more even I just want other people to get it. And so I need to meet people like you and other people, and use connection and the internet and everything that I'm trying to do in order to just get the energy going in this direction. So your work continues. You're still very much involved with these two streams. Even though you're not in academia officially, you have your intellect and that way of learning and communicating and is there. And then you have your experiential stream. So these are still very much alive for you, and I think this is a new way of integrating them. And I don't know if you would be willing to share what we might hear from you in the near future. One idea would be the Yogini Mela. And I'm wondering if there's anything else that's like bubbling under the surface for you right now.
No, this conversation with you has caused all this to start to take shape, frankly. So that's the value of sharing and collaboration, is that, we don't just merge into a circle. That's what I like. Each one of us has our own place. And we also build our own strength by sharing with others. We don't lose anything. And I think people are fearful if they get in a big circle, they just become a part of a blob. It's not really like that. No. Each person becomes greater by the sum of their
oneness is not uniformity.
Not at all. So yes, by talking to you, I've become strengthened or clearer in what's important to me. And I have got this idea to start this Yogini Mela. We're actually going to start some reading group that we actually have planned for August, where we're going to be reading comparative tantric texts of the Buddhist and Hindu Tantra that are about Yoginis and Dakinis. So we have found some very esoteric texts of these two traditions. We're just plunging in. We're not worrying if we're adequate or we know the language well enough. We're reading them in translation. Some of the people joining have the language skills to help us not make a total mess of it. But, we're not going to do it with that anxiety about being perfect. We're going to allow our intuitive sense reading the text to come up, because I believe these texts, these tantric texts, were written in that way. They were a window that the power could come through. So we don't want to just be totally all over the map and whatever crazy idea comes up is real. No, we have some quality control from each other as well. But if we share the idea and we check it and we feel it, I think there's room to not just recreate what existed in the past, which can never be done. We're in 1,000 years later. It's a different time. But there is a feeling that these deities, these devis want to come forth and help us in this world in a new way. So just as, Buddhism went from Sanskrit to Tibetan, went from one land to another, all these have come here into our culture, so into our body, into our life. So we have a right to, with respect, understand as best we can what was there, but have it be here now. So I'm interested in researching this and in making it real, whether it's through the intellectual path of reading, through meditation, through ritual practice. I do have courses that I teach on this. And pretty soon I'll try to get a website up so that I'm not hiding in my cave anymore. So you have made me come out and you have brought me into the light, and I'm very grateful for that. And I look forward to continual learning from you and sharing and inviting others to contribute as well.
I thank you from the bottom of my heart for making it real, for inviting others into it. And at the end of this video, I'm going to put up your email address for people to connect with you, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And also, if you're also, I just mentioned again that Amba Rinchen is living in Pacifica, California. And I'm on the big island of Hawaii. We're facing each other across the ocean, monitor to monitor. So it's been a very wonderful interview with you, Rinchen. Again, thank you for your trust and bringing all of this to YouTube and Rolmo. Interviews with positive energy. Namaste.
Namaste.